Welcome to Doing What Works, Exploring the Blue Economy, a podcast series that dives deep into the vast potential and challenges of the blue economy. I'm your host, Ashanti Blaze Hopkins, Interim Associate Dean at Santa Monica College's Center for Media and Design. Together, we'll navigate the uncharted waters of this exciting and rapidly growing sector. Joining us on the podcast today is a leader in diversifying STEM fields and creating more opportunities for highly skilled students from marginalized groups into the clean energy field. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Southern University and A&M College and a master's from the Georgia Institute of Technology. He's worked in the automotive industry, became an entrepreneur, and now is at the U.S. Department of Energy, where he's been for the last 6 years. Currently, he's Senior Advisor for Diversity with DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. I think he may have a bit of an overachiever complex, just a little bit. Terrence Mosley, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate the invite.
So our first question for every one of our Doing What Works podcast guests is always the same. What was your first job, and how does what you learned in that position inform what you do in your current role now?
Well, I tell you what, I can break this down in a couple of different ways, because the very first job, now I don't know how far you want to go back, but my father was a masonry contractor. And so my first job was hard labor. I had to get out and, haul wheelbarrows full of concrete and mortar to bricklayers to work on residential projects and commercial projects all across central Mississippi. So I knew how to get up in the morning and get out in the heat and whatever conditions were there. And I think the first lesson, number one, was that, it taught you about hard work and having to be able to talk with folks too, to be able to talk to people, communicate. Some of the, same things that we try to get across in the education system, you learn out there with manual labor sometimes as well. But first job that I had during my college years, though, was my first internship was actually in a laboratory working at the 3M Corporation. And so I did my first co-op stint in Austin, Texas at the time with 3M, and I'm a mechanical engineer, by major. And so that's why I answer it that way. So I answer two different sets of first jobs, because my first real working job where I had to pay taxes, that kind of thing.
The job.
Yeah. The real job, that was when 3M got a hold of me. So I learned a lot going from stint to stint, just figuring out what I did want to do and what I didn't want to do.
So we got a little glimpse into your background, and I want to go a little bit deeper, especially your experience attending historically black college and majoring in a discipline where people of color have not historically been represented. What was that like, and how did it shape your career trajectory going forward?
You know what? It was great for me, because I think it was part of the reason I had always wanted to go to an HBCU, I think, anyway, because to be honest, I don't know that it even matters so much what your major in, at the time, because all of us together were, there's a mix of students, but 95% of us are African American at HBCUs. And so when you're going through the process and you're going through it together as a cohort or as a class, you don't necessarily even know that you're in an area where it's so few of us. You don't necessarily find that out until you get out in the world. And so that's the other reason why those internships are so important, because when you leave from kind of the cocoon and the safety of the HBCU and the campus there, and just, you're around people that look like you and professors that look and talk like you and everything. And then you go off and you learn, oh man, maybe it's not as many of me out here as I thought about. And so for me, I think it's the case for a lot of people, that encouragement, that kind of safety that you feel in getting your legs together, trying to be your best in a technical area. I think all of that contributed to being able to feel more confident about your technical skills. The experience of going to an HBCU, though, was really what I needed at that time. I just knew engineering was like a profession that, it paid decently. I thought it had a good future to it. And so, I decided to pursue that instead of business or another route in reference to that question.
feel like it was just a really strong foundation. My husband also went to an HBCU, and he kind of gives the same insights, is that the foundation was solid. And so it didn't matter where he went from there. And so I want to kind of transition then from that solid foundation to the experiences that you had in between to your current role as senior advisor for diversity with the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. How are you working to help diversify the pipeline of students entering into STEM fields, especially with the background that you've had?
Yes, yeah. I'm really fortunate in a sense because even when I was, I spent almost a couple of decades at General Motors in the automotive field. And one of the things that happened, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I try to give to people is really bring your full self to whatever position that you're in. And when I say that, I'm referring to, like, if it's a passion of yours to kind of keep the pathways, the pipeline going, and you want to help people behind you, then you need to make it known and make it a part of what you do. During my entire career at General Motors and Delphi Automotive Systems, I never was I was always in a technical or a management position. I never had a full-time position doing, so-called diversity work or, equity work, anything like that. But it was always something I did as part of my job, and I just mixed it in. And that was whether it was recruiting, going back and trying to help lead recruiting activities. We helped to develop certain scholarship or fellowship programs to bring in more, diversity to the industry at that time. So I've always worked around it. And the fortunate thing about it is that you never know kind of the foundations you're building until you kind of get to the destination sometimes. And so what happened when I got into this position, I actually came into it through a fellowship called the AAAS Fellowship, or American Association for the Advancement of Science. And it's one of those avenues that a lot of people don't know about because, if you think in the traditional model, you go to school, you come out, you get a job or whatever, you hear about networking, you hear about other things to try to get to where you maybe want to go. But there's a lot of avenues that a lot of us aren't even familiar with. And, and I wasn't familiar with at the time. And some good friends of mine at the National Science Foundation, who I had done a lot of review panels with and taken part in some technical activities, as I've always tried to stay, kind of in the know what's going on out there now. And they told me about this fellowship. And what happens is that it ended up being a fantastic way to integrate the federal network, to learn more about how federal agencies work, the kind of work going on, and how your talents might be able to be utilized. And so, even me at the stage of my career that I was in, more like past mid professional, I found that, when I wanted a change of scenery and wanted to do something a little different, I had no idea. I had never worked in government before, but this was a perfect entryway for me to do that. So the reason I mentioned this, to get back to your question, though, is that when I was a fellow, I was able to initiate some of the programs. I reached back and got some of the same programs that I had always worked with or helped encourage, and brought them into a new situation with people who had never heard of those things. And some of these programs have been around 40, 50 years. And so when you asked that, I had to give you that background just to let you know and let your listeners know that little things that you might be working on now, little programs that you've had an effect at, are developing, those things can come to fruition at any time if you go to a new organization, a new place. So I just reached back to take something that I'm familiar with, that's a part of me, and bring it to the organization. Now we're in our second cohort of summer of students, where we've had over 20 students now that we're helping to sponsor to get, and they're all underrepresented areas of STEM, which is Hispanic Americans, African Americans, and Native Americans. Now we're supporting them to go on and get their masters and PhDs with no charge. They're able to have their tuition paid for and be able to have summer internships with us. Now they're part of the federal network. That's within their view now. Just things like that, So when you talk about the types of things that we're doing, we're trying some of everything. There's so many things that we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is, though, diversify the audience that's taking part.
There's so much that is there to unpack, and so much it feels like is in the works and is hit the ground running. You mentioned the blue economy, and so I want to come back to that a little bit.
Mhm.
When did you first learn about the blue economy, and how important will it be to ensure that a diverse population of students have exposure to this emerging field and the training that's necessary to be successful in the jobs that are coming related to the blue economy?
Absolutely. It's funny because I kind of related the blue economy in a sense to renewable energy overall, because when you look at the stats, we sponsor a report every year that basically comes out and it kind of gives you a sense of the breakdown of where careers are going in clean energy. And the thing that you quickly notice is that there is a lack of diversity in comparison to the population, of the country. And we already know where we're running short at. And it's pretty similar to STEM overall, as far as like the amount of people going into STEM and advanced areas, and achieving those degrees and advanced degrees and what have you. It's kind of a similar situation. So the great part about where we work at ERE is that we have 11 technical program offices, and a few of those they're all working in clean energy in some form or fashion, trying to, whether it's a lot of it is R&D, of course, but that we award and sponsor. But there's more and more of it that's being dedicated towards workforce and communities now. And so I think for me, I started being introduced to blue economy concepts within our water power technology office, as well as our bioenergy office, which are just two of the offices that really kind of work in that space. And you know, I can tell you, like I mentioned some of the efforts that we're doing with trying to diversify these fields. Well, for instance, our water power office, they have competitions each year. They have a marine energy collegiate competition and they have a hydropower collegiate competition. And I know the hydropower competition, it's done in partnership with the Hydropower Foundation. And one of the main tenets that I learned in meeting with them is that there are so many people that work in that industry that are getting ready to retire within the next 5 years. There's a huge number of people that are working like things we take for granted. That are working at dams and hydropower type facilities and they have all of this experience and they may have been working in the industry 30 years or so, but they're getting ready to leave and we don't have a proper really pipeline of people to jump in and take the helm. And so what we're seeing is that by trying to generate a lot of these student activities and different prizes and things that we're trying to do where the process to apply is not as complicated, we're really trying to drive results in that area so that we can, fill these spots that are available. Now, the other thing that I would mention, though, is that, as you know, whether it's blue economy or whether it doesn't really matter if it's solar or, solar related jobs, if it's other things like that, the jobs that we're looking to fill, if it's blue economy jobs, can be kind of specific. It's not just it's not as much generalist anymore. And I'll give you just one simple example. It's outside of blue, but like with solar, I mentioned that to be a solar installer, some states are different requirements, but you can be a general electrician. And that can be the key to jump into becoming a solar installer, to really know that part of the equation. And of course, that can integrate into housing, into commercial buildings, whatever it might be. Well, with the blue economy, it can tend to work the same way. And I think from some of the efforts that are happening with the BCAP group out in LA there, you start to notice that there's really specific jobs that are coming up that industry, is telling us that this is where things are going. We need people to fill these slots. And so not only is it important to try to put people in position and encourage them to follow STEM paths and other paths that kind of lead them just in this general direction, but it's even more important now to give them the industry connections and the actual examples of the work that's needed. One of the other competitions that our bioenergy office sponsors is Algae Prize. And, I had no idea how much could be done with algae. When you get into the details of that, it's incredible. And so just knowing that and knowing that that's some of the workforce areas that are being identified, where jobs are being identified, where industry is telling us what they need, I think that is kind of the important part that's happening now, is trying to find out what the demand is going to be and then what it's going to take to actually produce graduates and people that can come into those positions. And part of the important part of that is that it may not take 4-year degrees. It may not take, community college degrees. It may be people coming out of high school that can handle some of these jobs with the proper training. And so I think that's part of what's really happening now. I think that's a big part of what's happening now, is trying to figure out the channels to get people to these jobs that are coming here in the near future that could lead to long-term careers in clean energy.
You mentioned Algae Prize in part of your answer. And so I want to specifically talk to you about the Algae Feedstocks Logistics Project. Why is it so important to get students at both the high school and college level exposed to this idea of bioenergy and the workforce that will be needed now and into the future? And what's at stake if we don't kind of really drill down on that and ensure that they have that exposure and the skills that they need in order to be competitive?
Right. Well, with our algae competition, it's basically a 2-year competition because we want to give people time to really propose their projects, develop them and implement them. But the thing that I think is great about it is that it reaches back. It's open to students from high school levels as well. It's open to students at all levels, whether you're, high school, university, or graduate students or what have you. And I think that's really telling right there as far as, what you mentioned as far as like what's at stake. I really think it's one of the things that I talk about, regardless of industry almost, or regardless of the clean energy area. What we're finding, though, is that not only are we needing to expose kids to all of these different topic areas, but we got to drive interest. We've got to really get people understanding this is why it's important. And, we can throw around numbers all we want as far as, hey, we want to, reach a net zero economy by 2050. You hear the administration say that a lot, and we're all pushing towards, trying to meet some of these goals. But the truth is that if we don't secure enough people with interest, and this is once again kind of where the diversity point comes in, is that there's no way we can meet any of our goals in clean energy if we don't have enough people to take part in the transition.
Taking a step back and reflecting kind of the big picture, what do you think we're doing really well in this country regarding the blue economy and even renewable energy as it relates to the Department of Energy? And what nations can we learn from? Who's ahead of us that we can maybe say, okay, that's a bit of a template, or maybe we can borrow that. It looks successful. What does that look like from that, kind of 50,000-foot view?
Yeah, I think from a bigger view standpoint, I'll try to answer the last part first. Is when it comes to examples, I think part of what we look at sometimes is European countries. Situations are a little different, as you know, like in Europe, air conditioning isn't as prevalent as it is over here. But one of the things that we have learned from is that from the building stock. Buildings contribute, a large percentage of carbon in our atmosphere. And that's one of the things that we're doing research on and working on now, is trying to find ways to have alternative materials outside of just, maybe concrete or different things that are less carbon, carbon intensive. And so one of the things that we see from out of European countries, and you can go to places like, Denmark or Sweden or different areas, and you can see that the housing stock is different, where they're producing more, net zero housing, really more use of wind energy, more use of, water power, in the blue economy sense, more with solar and battery storage, different things like that. So I think we try to take what we can from those examples and see what other people are doing. And we're, constantly trying to keep up with what's going on, benchmarks, see what people are doing around the world. And but I guess when you ask for an example, I think we're doing some things good in the space, but we just have such a such a vast problem to hit, to try to really reduce what's happening in this country that it's really taking a multi-pronged approach. Where in California, where there's more open policies towards, solar energy and connecting to the grid and, utilizing water and wind. Some areas of the country don't have that. I think that's where part of the issues reside as well, is that from state to state, there's so many different attitudes and, policies that are in effect. It can make it difficult to try to have consistent effects across the entire country because of some of those policies. And, we try to make sure that we're trying to provide programs and opportunities that are available to everyone and that are open to everyone to take part in. Doesn't happen all the time, but that's what that's really what we focus on trying to do.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask people in general is, what would you do if you were unimpeded, right? So if you had a magic wand and you had this dream state, right? All green lights, no red lights. What is your dream state for the blue economy in this country and the areas of energy efficiency and renewable energy? What does that look like?
I really would love it if we could have nationwide, codes that really were able to truly take effect in a similar way across the country. I think that's part of, when it comes to the blue economy, though, obviously there are some areas of the country that, don't have the same access to, whether it's hydropower or, some of the different industries. And so I think the thing that I hope for all of the renewable energy technologies, including blue economy technologies, is that the areas that can fully take advantage of them do so. And I think if I could show you a map, there's been, research done from some of our, chief scientists and people that are in the know on the R&D space that show you projections of which renewable technologies are most available in different areas of the country, or that could be available if the policies were in place and people could implement them fully. And it really shows you that if we had that green light that you talk about, and if you could fully implement and connect to the grid in all of the ways that are out there and that are possible, if you could do that, we would really benefit the people of this country so much, because we would have access to lower cost energy. And of course, like anything else, the more people that utilize a technology, or the more people that buy it or that have access to it, the more the prices can come down. If we're in a situation where only certain people get access to solar or to, water power or wind energy, whatever it might be, the prices are not going to really benefit all Americans like it really should. It's great that you give me the permission to have a green light, but yeah, I think that's if I had my rathers, as they say, I think that's the part that I really would like to see, is that take advantage of the natural resources in whichever area of the country that you're in. In some areas, it's not going to be, geared towards necessarily more of a blue economy. In some areas on the coast and, on all of the coastal areas and areas that have, access to some of the natural resources needed to do that, that would be fantastic. And there, like you said, there's other parts of the country that are more available for maybe solar energy, more for wind or what have you. But the bottom line is that if we were allowed to really wave a magic wand and say, okay, everywhere across the country, you can build to this standard. It's guaranteed that you will see better resilience, that you'll see better utility costs, that you'll see better health, better air quality and better health for for the people living in these homes. Who wouldn't want that? But, like you said, a lot of the other things get in the way and things don't happen like that. And so we continue to show the examples where we can. But I think that's that's the only thing that I would want to do, is just for every area of the country to really take advantage of the natural resources that they have, and to take advantage of the connected technologies that could go along with those natural resources to help be able to, lower cost for people, for constituents in those areas, to be able to provide jobs for people in those areas, and really to, just be able to take care of ourselves more off of our land and natural resources.
Terrence Mosley, thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us. And thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the blue economy. We hope this episode has inspired you to explore further and learn more about this vital sector. If you enjoy doing what works, exploring the blue economy, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes that push the boundaries of knowledge and open new possibilities. Until next time.